It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast. Yes, we are back talking your property news as we do 7 days a week, and heard on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Amazon. Into the middle of our working week. It is a Wednesday, the 30th day for October for 2024. Now, the September house price report from Domain, this was released yesterday, which makes for some pretty interesting observations. The house and unit prices in Australia's capital cities have hit new record highs, with house prices seeing their 7th consecutive rise and units with their 6th. However, growth has slowed significantly. House price growth is now 3 times slower than the previous quarter, while unit growth is gradually decelerating. Sydney, Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth have record high house prices, though growth has slowed in most cities. Notably, Brisbane has become the second most expensive city for units, and Adelaide is now 5th. So let's catch up with Nicola Powell, who is the Chief of Research and Economics from Domain this morning. And good morning to you, Nicola. Welcome back to the Real Estate Breakfast. Hey, we're starting to run out of the year for 2024.
We certainly are. Where has that year gone? I think I've blinked and, we're almost, we're well into spring and we're on the final runway to the end of the year.
That is for sure. So perhaps to kick us off this morning with a little bit of an overview of this report and why it's important, do you think that these types of reports, especially for those that follow the data and the trends, are important?
Oh, they're ever so important. I mean, we know that Australians are absolutely obsessed with property, and we recently did a national survey, and 77% of us plan to engage in the residential property market over the next 12 months, which is absolutely huge. I mean, a lot of that is dreaming and monitoring, but this is where the house price report really feeds into that, because it allows you to have an understanding of current market dynamics. And when you have a better understanding of current market dynamics in your capital city and also at your suburb level, it allows you to make better informed decisions by using property data.
Yeah, well, we should have a look at that property data that you're talking about. Let's kick it off with Sydney house prices, which have now risen for the 7th consecutive quarter.
Absolutely. I mean, Sydney's property market is really one of its own. We're starting to see some different dynamics unravel, and that is that slowdown in house price growth. So as you mentioned, house prices continue to rise, 7th consecutive quarter of a gain, a record high at just over 1.6 million. But the pace of growth is slowing significantly. It's rising at about half the pace compared to the previous quarter and compared to the same time last year. But the interesting dynamic in Sydney's housing market is units are rising as well, but they haven't seen that deceleration like we've seen for house prices. So it means unit prices are rising, but they've gained a little bit of momentum. And I think that really showcases the affordability barriers in Sydney's housing market. I think what we're seeing are buyers are being shifted, they're being pushed towards more affordable price points, and obviously units offer that.
Yes, so that is a quick look at Sydney. Melbourne's median house price, now that declined for the 3rd consecutive quarter by $16,000 or 1.5% over the September quarter.
Yeah, we continue to see sustained weakness coming out of Melbourne's housing market, particularly for house prices. We've actually got house prices reaching a new price trough for this cycle. And really, when you look at Melbourne, it's one of the weaker capital cities. It's really failed to establish a recovery, a pricing recovery, like we've seen in other capital cities. But that's really unusual. I mean, when you look at Melbourne house prices over the last, couple of years, they really haven't done much. And I think what we've got now in Melbourne is the value is building. So I do think for those astute buyers, it is a good time to buy because that value is building over time. And I suspect when we hit the next price cycle, what we're likely to see is Melbourne will overperform relative to other capital cities.
Yes, no doubt. The investors too, they are taking a big interest in Melbourne at the moment. All right, let's head north, get into Queensland and into Brisbane because the house prices have risen there regarding your report for the 7th consecutive quarter by almost $15,000 or 1.5% over the September quarter, now at $944,945, almost $1 million.
I know, what a milestone, hey? Only another, just over $5,000 and Brisbane will hit the $1 million median house price club. And that is likely to occur by the end of this calendar year. And it is such a significant milestone. It's a psychological hurdle for buyers when you hit that $1 million median house price. Brisbane is absolutely on track to achieve that by the end of this calendar year. We've got a bit of momentum loss though. Prices are rising. They're just not rising as fast as they were. But, Brisbane is one of the 3 capital cities that really is a standout performer and continues to see growth.
Yes, you talk about that $1 million barrier, that breakthrough. It's a really big psychological number, isn't it? It really does sort of play on the minds of people trying to get into the market, selling, of course, and the sentiments around all of that.
It so does. I think, it's obviously great for sellers, but not so great for buyers, and particularly those looking to break into the housing market. I think, what we have got when you hit that $1 million milestone, it is that psychological hurdle. I think it just screams unaffordable. And, I just think it puts the housing market for Brisbane in a different realm once it does break that $1 million median.
All right, we are talking with Nicola Powell with relation to the latest report out of Domain this morning, just released yesterday. When we come back, we will have a look at Adelaide. We'll also look at Canberra, Perth, and what is happening in Hobart and Darwin. That is all next.
Every morning from 6 a.m, we bring you the latest real estate news with diverse perspectives from leading industry experts. We deliver the most property podcasts across Australia every week.
A committee has the right to go out to their own insurance broker and get alternate quotes. So a real diligent committee can and should go out and have a look at alternate options through other brokers as well.
With NetStrata, how widespread do you think this sort of practice is within the strata management industry right now, where we are in 2024?
Obviously, the NetStrata example is something I've never seen before of 148%. We have, as an organisation, called remuneration models that make up 40% of the premium to be excessive and unreasonable. And unfortunately, 40% started becoming normal for a lot of strata managers, but we just looked at that and said, well, whose interest is it in for such high remuneration models? It's certainly not in the interest of the consumer.
Every week, real estate transactions take place as the market shifts month by month. And every day, we keep you better informed and updated on the Real Estate Podcast.
And it is a Real Estate Wednesday. Nicola Powell is with us from Domain, and we are up to Adelaide, Nicola. Adelaide's median house price. Now, that has risen for the 7th consecutive quarter by almost 39 grand or 4.2% over the September quarter to 973,336. Again, getting very close to that $1 million mark.
Absolutely. Adelaide has absolutely been the star performer. It is the star on top of the Christmas tree. It has continued to plough ahead in terms of price growth. And when you look at what house prices have done since March 2020, Adelaide is by far the standout performer. House prices since March 2020 have risen 79% in Adelaide, far surpassing other capital cities. For Melbourne, for example, they've only risen 12.5% over that time. But as you said, edging closer to $1 million. Again, another capital city that could quite possibly hit that $1 million threshold by the end of this calendar year. At $973,000, it's edging closer. And we continue to see really strong rates of price growth. And I think it really just showcases the strength that Adelaide has continued to see. And we've got to remember, Adelaide has always been renowned as that quiet achiever, and that title has absolutely been smashed over the last few years.
Yes, no doubt about it. It is the darling of the property market, has been for the last 2 to 3 years. Will 2025 continue in that trend? Now, if you're in Canberra wondering what is happening, Canberra's median house price declined over the September quarter, dropping by almost 14,000 or 1.2% after 2 consecutive quarters of growth. So a bit of a mixed bag here.
Yeah, so Canberra's housing market has also been one of the weaker performers. It's similar to Melbourne. And what we've seen in Canberra, it really has not been able to move into that established recovery. We've seen a bit of a fluctuation over recent quarters, but it is again on the decline. And overall, when you look at supply, if you're a buyer in Canberra, if you're looking for your dream home, supply has risen. It's 33% higher compared to the same time last year, well above the 5-year average. And I think what that is doing is making it much more a buyer's market. And, buyers are putting in those cheeky offers. We've got days on market lengthening, discounting increasing, and that increased stock is really swaying in favour of buyers, and they are utilising those conditions to make those cheeky offers.
Now, we talked about Adelaide being the darling. The other darling, of course, is Perth's housing market, which continues to stand out nationally, with the median house price rising by approximately $27,000, 3.1% over the September quarter, to a record $894,842.
Perth is absolutely one of those standout performers too. We've still got robust growth. Just over 3% increase in a quarter is really robust growth. But what we're now seeing is the rate of growth is starting to lose a little bit of momentum. But we have to remember we've seen some extreme increases in house prices coming out of Perth. And I think we have to remember over the 2010s, Perth really underperformed. And what we've got now is Perth is absolutely playing catch up over from a period where it really did underperform relative to other capital cities. Investors are very much looking towards Perth. They're looking towards the market that has, one of the tightest rental markets in Australia, is more affordable than the East Coast and has really good gross rental yields also.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? If you're an investor and you're looking at Adelaide and Perth, it's almost like a bit of a coin toss at the moment with the way these markets are travelling.
We definitely have a multi-speed market across Australia. And I think what we've got is, investors are shying away from, markets, even Melbourne. So Melbourne's seen a change in land taxation, and that's had an impact on investor activity. And what they're doing is they're looking towards those other markets that have got better prospects for capital growth. Investors are driven by capital growth prospects. And, we're still expecting markets like Brisbane and Perth and somewhat in Adelaide as well to continue to rise. And, particularly Perth, investors have had their eye on Perth for a while.
And if you're having your cornies in Hobart and Darwin this morning and thinking we've forgotten about you, of course we haven't. So take that away. What's happening in Hobart and Darwin to finish off with?
So we're seeing Hobart see a little bit of growth. That was one of the markets that really had failed to kind of push into a recovery, but it appears that we're now seeing growth. We did see strong growth over the quarter, and it's posted annual gains for the first time in 2 years. Darwin, on the other hand, has been a bit more volatile. We've seen some volatile quarters, a bit of upwards movements, a bit of downwards movements. We've seen the steepest price drop for units over the quarter since 2020. It's declined for the third consecutive quarter. So much more volatility in the unit sector. House prices in Darwin did increase over the quarter, but as I said, it has been a bit more of a volatile market.
Well, that kind of wraps us up with the September house price report from Domain. The expert, as always, Nicola Powell, of course, the Chief of Research and Economics. Hey, thanks for breaking all of that down for us, and enjoy your Wednesday, Nicola.
Thanks for having me on again.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.